Mabuhay! I'm Eugenia Moraleda, and you're watching Landscapes of Learning. You are meeting, probably for several times already, our logo. A red one, circular, but if you notice this side, you notice some um, diagonal lines that call it. They stand for Landscapes of Learning, where the learners are feeling good. Translated, it's joyful learning in the Landscapes of Learning series. And when we say series, this online series consists of 4 programs. The first is the Teach Learn. Teach Learn, all the issues about teaching, education, the shift that we have to make in terms of the activities relative to face-to-face encounter and no face-to-face encounter. Then you have the music. Based on the K-12 2016 curriculum, we're still holding on to the concepts and the competencies involved in music and arts. The same thing, skills and competencies, and of course, scenarios. A little word on scenarios, which we will be soon be discussing or observing or analyzing as a lesson. In scenarios, these are value-oriented stories drawn or adapted from traditional myths or legend. Like if you talk about the first one is crack in the wall. What is that? Well, it's one of the twist to a story, one of the fairy tales, very suitable for elementary. But it talks of values, it talks of activities of the young that will lead to a success. And what is that? Well, we will find out soon. Then you have Kapinangan 2, or I have called it Askar Ay Mel, meaning it's the daughter of Kapinangan. Kapinangan was the Sultan's wife before, or no, until she was sentenced to death. What happens to her is the story, where the story begins. Now you also have Panji. It's a famous Mahabharata, a tale of Indonesia, which is about a prince and of course yung kanyang wife and his love, which really became the problem of the story. Then of course you have yung Aida, and then the last one is we haven't given yet the title, but it is about a young girl who was stranded somewhere when the volcano in Taal erupted. So these are the stories, but they are competences, skills, and values oriented. And the values are supposed to be after or while the COVID-19 is here with us. Now, so much for today's lesson, which is a continuation of form, but now it is not art form, but more on, or is, musical forms. Remember our past lessons in music were rhythm, melody, and those are only 2 elements. There are still some more. But for now, to relate it to what we had in the arts, we will take on also the topic form, but this time in music. What is form in music? Well, like in arts, it consists of what are the little things that build up until it becomes a composition. In music, we have to be familiar with the terms, to my right, motif, then you have phrase, unitary, and phrase, and then unitary, and we still have some more. But if you notice, we also have the word harmony. Basically, what do we do to unify a piece of work which comes from a small unit. So how do we define, or what is motif to start with? Motif is the smallest unit or the small unit of a musical piece, whether it be folk song, lullaby. Sometimes it is called or interchanged with the word theme. Sometimes, loosely, it is said it's the first melody. But let us put a little more specificity by defining what is motif and how to differentiate motif from phrase. The first question is quite tricky because some musicians will say, pareho lang yun, or it's the same. But what is unique about a motif is that it is a small or the smallest unit of a musical piece. Second, it is recurring throughout the piece. But the reappearance of the motif, if you have identified it, is significant. If we might translate it, it means that the motif is the one that somehow connects, that's why you have links, connects the threads of the other parts. That we'll find that out. For example, in the piece, if you call sit, serit, sit, it's street, sit, serit, sit. It's the smallest unit. Is that, which is the motive? Is this the motive? Or is this the motive? Well, we cannot measure that. If we think of this as the motive, that is the motive because it's the smallest unit so far. Now this becomes another motive. But sometimes when two motifs are connected or they appear continuously one after the other, we can call it also a phrase. So it's an extended. The motif can also be, while it's the smallest unit, there is also a meaning that if you have two motifs, different motifs or similar motifs, which links the two, you get a phrase. So there now. Which is longer? Is it the phrase? Definitely that is a phrase. And it was made up of two small units. That was one, then that's another motif. So you see, it's a bit tricky to distinguish between a motif and a phrase. But what is sure is that a motif is always shorter than a phrase. A phrase is like a sentence wherein the first clause talks about the subject, the second clause talks about something about the subject. So it's a complete statement, a musical statement compared to the motif, which is not the seed, but it is the one that distinguishes it from the other pieces. Listen to sit, sit, sit. 1, 2, 4. Compare 1 and the third. Is this the same? Third. Is that the same? Yes, no? Compare now the 1 and 3 and then 2 and 4. Are they the same or were there some changes? Now let's continue. We are now on 5th. How is that compared to motive 1? How is that compared to motive 4? So every measure, compare 1 and 2, and then 2 and 3, 1 and 3, and 2 and 4 to find out is, oh, a motif is like a seed. It grows, it develops and grows. But it is not always repeated in the same way. It may be repeated If you repeat the one that is similar, notice there is a change of note or the rhythm is the same. Oh, this is the third. Are they the same? No, there is a change in the melody. So that small motif was repeated what we call rhythmically. This is the rhythm. That's the rhythm. Another rhythm. So in the song Sitsaritsit, you get the original motif, but in different ways. Changes are made either by changing the pitch, whether it's up or lower, down or middle, but the melody keeps changing, the note, but the rhythm is steady. That is steady. The other motif is also repeated. So two motifs here which forms into a and what is different is that some changes are made either with the note either going up or down, but definitely the rhythm is. Now the next one is change note, then again the same rhythm, the same rhythm. In this whole piece, you notice that the rhythmic or the rhythm of the beat or the rhythm of the melody were one. It was the rhythm of the beat that kept changing. The melody kept changing, but the rhythm of the beat, okay, repeat. The rhythm of the beat, this one, which we now consider as a phrase, so it remained the same. So now you will understand why a motif may start from a small seed by a few notes. Now when it joins another motif, you have a phrase. And when it becomes a phrase, that phrase can be repeated until the end of the piece, which becomes a unitary piece, meaning there is only one melody that is sustained. In this instance, in Sitsaritsit, it does not sound like again, this is the first motive. Now the rhythm is repeated, but the melody is changed. Now again, rhythm is repeated. So the rhythm was repeated throughout. From the small unit, it became a phrase by joining two motifs, and the phrase by repeating with different melodies. The rhythm of the beat stayed with the same rhythm of the melody. It was the melody that went up and down. The rhythm of the beat changed. You had a unitaria or a unitary piece. Now also in Sitsaritsit, it appears that the song is short, and we call it unitaria. But you notice also in the piece, if you look at the piece, there are 3 verses to the same melody. Now this is repeated several times until it ends. But then we do not end there, we repeat it, but with different, this unitary form is repeated with different lyrics. In fact, in this whole piece, there are 3 sets of lyrics. It's the first melody is repeated twice and then 3rd time. Now that is what we call in form as strophic. Strophic. C. Did you get the idea? Okay. First, we start a motif. It is the shortest possible. And it recurs throughout the piece. Did it recur in Sitsit? Yes. But you notice, while it repeated, it was linked by what? It was the rhythm of the melody or the rhythm of the beat, if you call it the rhythmic part, that was repeated with different melodies. We also call it also rhythm of the melody because the melody changes. Now, the next part is still this rhythm of the melody. So from motif, it developed into a phrase, and the phrase repeated, it developed into unitary form. Now, even when it reached unitary form, there were changes or additions to the same first set of melodies or motifs. There were changes in lyrics, and if that is the case, it is called a strophic form. Okay? Are we clear about that? So, motif, phrase, unitary, and when you add additional lyrics, it becomes a strophic form. S-T-R-O-P-H-I-C. Now let us test yourself with other pieces. If I identify the motif, tell me if it is only a phrase that was repeated, or the phrase was changed, or it became unitary and there were strophic forms. So it will now be a choice between phrase and unitary. The first piece is Mary Ann. Now, if this is the what do you think? Do we have a phrase or a motif? Now, let's continue with it without answering. Reflect on it. This was your first motif. That is the smallest unit. But if when joined another motif, then still the two motifs became a phrase. So you have a complete phrase from definitely this is a different rhythm. Now listen to that phrase, that whole 1, 2, 3, 4 measures. Okay, is that the same as the first one? Rhythmically? Yes, no. Then listen. Is the melody still the same, even if the rhythm is the same? So, there was a change in melody from measures 5, 6, 7, and 8, meaning while measures 1 and 4 was a complete phrase, the phrase was repeated but with a rhythm. The rhythm was repeated but with a different tune. Now listen again to the next one. Next phrase. How is this compared to 1 and 4, measures 1 and 4? Is it the same or repeated or changed? The same, but with a very slight change in the very beginning, but after that it's a complete repeat. Now listen again to the last phrase. Is that the same as the measures 5, 6, 7, and 8? Or there were changes? The same? Well, the last measure, there was a slight change. That's why we could end. But again, this piece, while it is a unitary piece, the melody kept repeating with the rhythm of the melody kept repeating, but the melody, there were slight changes. So it still belongs to the form unitary, isa. But it is not unitary alone, because if you will look at the piece, there is another set of lyrics added to the piece. So all day. But in the second piece, there are different words, different lyrics. So this becomes, again, what we said, a strophic song. 2 or 3 lines of lyrics, different lyrics, are added to the original tune. So what was true for Sitsit? Motive, it developed into a phrase, and then from phrase it developed into a unitary, and from unitary it became a strophic form. You see now the development. Now let's try for this last piece, which is, we should have really studied this earlier, but due to Christmas vacation and the like, but not yet behind. This is, are you familiar with the song Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? Now, this is his first melody, first motive. That is your first motive. Second motive. That is your second motive. Now, 2 motives, different motives, you have a phrase. Okay, so repeat. The first phrase now is, now that phrase is, listen. Is it the same in rhythm, or the melody was changed? Okay, there was a slight change in the melody. The first one starts with G. This second one is, so there is a slight change. Now listen to this third phrase. Is this similar, the same to the first or to the second? Now the last one. Is this similar to the second melody or to the first? Now, there's a change here, huh? Is this, the last one that I played, is it the same to 1, 2, or 3? Is it of the same material? Is the rhythm the same? Notice, this is the rhythm now of this last melody that I played. So there is a different material, because if we compare this last one to the first melodies, it's not the same. Definitely the rhythm is the same, and even the tune is not the same. So there's a contrast, if you might want to call it. There is quite a contrast. Now when the form has a different part, not unit, the first one was, but this last one is, so it's quite the same. Now you call the form binary, bi, B-I-N-A-R-Y, meaning there are two forms or two parts. The first is called A. A would consist of the several melodies before it, and then a contrast is offered, which is tan ta ra ra ran tan tan. That's a different part. So it is B, and the form becomes binary. So let us review. You have a motive. Combine two motifs, you have a phrase. A phrase may be repeated either rhythmically or melodically. Still you have a phrase, and if it's still the same rhythm of the beat or rhythm of the melody until the end, you have a unitary form. But when the unitary form of the first melody is repeated with different lyrics, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, but still the melody is the same, you have what we call strophic, S-T-R-O-P-H-I-C. And the samples that we gave you is Mary Ann is one. Now the last one that I played was Rudolph, and if you notice, there was from it did not stay as unitary, because a new unit or a new part that we called it B was introduced. So you had two units already playing, A and B. And if you notice also that in the B part, there is a little change. The B is emphasized because a new set of lyrics were placed. So that would be binary. Repeat, from motive you get phrase, from phrase you have unitary, and when additional verses are joined but the melody is the same, you have a strophic form. But when a new part or a new melody is introduced, neither related to the first melody by rhythm or by notes, we have a binary form. Now, for your review, I would suggest that you pick on your familiar songs and try to track the motif. It was developed in the same way that we did. Like we had motif, you get phrase, you get unitary, phrase with other lyrics, you get a strophic part. But when the first melody is countered or is opposed or is contrasted or elaborated by a different melody, you get a binary form. So much for that. Good day, and please don't forget to subscribe so that we can go to the next episodes of, it's still going to be music, a little review of music and how it is layered. When we say layered, it doesn't only flow until binary. Sometimes a simple melody can have an additional melody above which is called descant, or it can have something below the main melody, which is the ostinato. And of course, sometimes it's sustained throughout. The whole piece being played through a sustained interval, either by fifths or sixths, which is drone. But that is for the next episode. Good day, this is Eugenia Moroleda of Landscapes of Learning. Thank you.